There exist two future Sydneys. One is born in the values found in the planning documents. The other is found in the actions that they propose. Nowhere is this clearer than Sydney's Inner West cycle plan. Limited transport options have resulted in significant traffic congestion and unsafe streets. But this fails for everyone, as drivers are stuck in traffic, people walking are left to dash between gaps in traffic, and people on bikes get squeezed between parked cars and moving traffic. So it's a simple solution, right? We've just got to diversify the transport options and, of course, prioritise the ones that promote health impacts like fitness, mental well-being, not getting hit by cars, and then disincentivise the ones that bring congestion and pollution.
Hey, you want a party? Go in there. Come to the Inner West party.
Here are some challenges that the Inner West cycling strategy identifies. Its location between Sydney's western suburbs, Sydney City, the beaches, airports and ports, results in significant traffic moving through the area. Well, luckily for us, car traffic that moves through one area to get to another has one very important characteristic. It doesn't have to use local roads. But unfortunately, in practice, that doesn't really happen thanks to the way that our roads are designed. We'll get to some solutions for that later. It's also worth noting that the City of Sydney actually cannot handle and does not want more car traffic, so we shouldn't really be designing the Inner West about directing cars towards the city, since nobody really wants that anymore. But even if none of this through traffic did spill out onto local roads, there would still be one very significant problem with it that even extends to railways that this cycling strategy actually identifies very well. Sarah, a business owner from Rozelle who prefers to do deliveries by cargo bike, said,
"All our major roads and railway lines are like bridgeless rivers."
These physical barriers require pedestrians, bike riders and motorists to converge at narrow crossing points. Crossing major roads like the City West Link, Liverpool Road, Parramatta Road and Sydenham Road makes walking and cycling journeys longer and slower. I'm really glad that they're acknowledging that, since this is a problem that I've found pervasive when cycling through the Inner West. Just waiting at the traffic lights at City West Link can add up to 5 minutes on what should be a simple 20-minute journey into the city from my place. So what does the cycling strategy propose as a solution? Nothing. Okay, so building new pedestrian and cycling bridges and underpasses, it's going to be an important part of a cohesive network. While this may seem quite daunting, I mean, bridges and underpasses are going to cost a heck of a lot more than a few concrete barriers and some green paint. It's actually a really good opportunity. Let's take a journey to Calgary, Canada. I don't have anywhere near that kind of budget. The first piece of cycling infrastructure that Calgary made, well, it wasn't a bike path. It was a bridge called Peace Bridge. Now, Peace Bridge faced insane opposition when it was first proposed. Not only because it was the first significant piece of active transport infrastructure that the city had built, but also because they had hired an architect to make it look really beautiful. Calgarians, for some reason, I don't know the culture there, but they were strangely against anything looking nice. I guess it's like an oil town. They were like, oh, we're just here making our money. You know, if we wanted nice things, we'd go to Paris. And like things got so bad that the mayor actually had to be escorted to the opening of the bridge by 4 bodyguards. However, the bridge is now the most photographed place in the city. And it is crossed around 28,000 times a week on average. Closer to home, the Parramatta River Escarpment Walk recently won an Engineering Excellence Award. And no offence Calgary, but it's used on average 38,000 times a week. There's no reason that a bridge over a railway or a motorway can't be as beautiful or as useful as a bridge over a river. Another solution for these bridgeless rivers is traffic calming. A lot of the roads that serve as blocks shouldn't even be full of traffic in the first place. Parramatta Road and Victoria Road are prime examples of this. See my previous video about why Parramatta Road is really negatively impacted by its status as a stroad. Similar things apply to parts of Victoria Road, especially the part in Balmain that is going to soon become redundant as a means of carrying traffic because there's going to be a tunnel opening under it next year. Bus-only lanes, cycleways, landscaping, even street parking, all of these things could help direct commuters onto more appropriate roads, while at the same time meaning that less traffic equals less waiting at traffic lights and therefore less bridgeless rivers. So when the cycleway plan brings up the limited amount of crossings for these bridgeless rivers, it acknowledges the fact that they create conflict, squeeze points it calls them, but it's missing another important factor: added trip length created by the detours that they necessitate. Delft, a city in the Netherlands, has a cycling mode share of 41%. I couldn't actually find any data about the Inner West cycling mode share, which is odd because I feel like that would be good research to do before making a cycling action plan. I did, however, find some pretty up-to-date information about Sydney as a whole from 2021, and that information said that the cycling mode share of Sydney was less than 1%. I would presume it's slightly higher in the Inner West because I see a lot more people cycling there than, say, when I'm in Epping or Strathfield or something like that, but I wouldn't say it's a whole lot higher. But look, while we're a long way from Delft's lofty heights, we can still learn a lot from it. In the 1970s, car traffic began replacing bicycle and walking traffic there, and the government decided that to prevent pollution, congestion, and road deaths, something had to be done about that. What made Delft so successful, especially compared to failed cycleway experiments in Amsterdam and The Hague that were happening at the same time, is that they focused on the entire network. Well, 3 networks. The network that we're going to focus on, though, they called the urban network. We're going to focus on this one because it will be the easiest to implement, and despite making up only 30% of the cycling network in Delft, it accounted for 60% of the trips. So what is Delft's urban network? It's a grid of safe and prioritised cycle routes, whether that's what we would call quiet ways or separated cycleways, and it had a mesh of 500 metres, give or take about 100 metres. Now, one of the ways Delft achieved this mesh is by building lots of small cycling and pedestrian-only bridges and underpasses to get over railways, canals, rivers and roads. By this point, Delft did already have a pretty decent cycling mode share at 38% and a halfway decent cycle network as well, but cycling numbers were falling, and the introduction of these networks actually reversed that trend and brought it up to 41%. So while Sydney's Inner West has a lot more that needs doing than Delft did when it introduced its urban network, we can still learn from the same basic principles. How well does the proposed bike network stack up? Well, some of the gaps are over 2 kilometres. Remember, the recommended distance is 500 metres, 600 at the most. These 2 kilometre gaps could result in detours of up to 4 kilometres, which is ridiculous because most trips that cycling is targeting are under 5 kilometres to begin with.
Cause let it know we got it on screaming. Ain't no party like a in the West party, cause a in the West party don't stop.
Here are some suggestions that I made with my own map. I decided to, well, first of all, rejig the graphic design a bit to make it more like City of Sydney's bike network plan, and then I added some recommendations for some ideas about where bike lanes and quiet ways could complete the network. As you can see, the vast majority of this network that has a mesh of 500 metres is comprised of my suggestions. And even more worrying is that some of the biggest gaps in the proposed network, well, they're actually where people were asking for more infrastructure specifically. People wanted infrastructure in Ashfield and Newtown, including links to the City of Sydney's bike network. How does the proposed network address these requests? Well, unfortunately, the link to Newtown is pretty roundabout and contains some strange detours. The link to Ashfield is good and long, but it runs east to west for about 3 kilometres without any north-south connections. People also asked for better connections to existing cycle routes, such as Lewisham beside the rail line, Stanmore, Norton Street and Marion Street in Leichhardt, and Marrickville Road. The current cycleway plan has a route down Marion Street, which is fantastic. This will link the Greenway to Marketplace, parts of Norton Street, Whites Creek, as well as the new cycleway they're going to build on Johnston Street. Unfortunately though, there's no planned north-south access to Stanmore. There's also no planned cycleway on or parallel to Marrickville Road or Norton Street. The area around Lewisham Station is the most telling compromise though. It follows a strange roundabout route around the station, never intersecting with it, that shows an unfortunate misunderstanding about the benefits of bicycle infrastructure. For starters, connections with train stations are vital. Here's a map of how much of the inner west is within 1 kilometre of a train station, around a 10 to 15 minute walk. Now here's a map of how much of the inner west is within 3 kilometres of a train station. That's around a 10 to 15 minute cycle. Yep, it's essentially the entire inner west. Even Balmain could easily get similar benefits from its buses if Victoria Road had similar amenities that some of the North Shore's B-line stops have. This detour also doesn't acknowledge the benefits that traffic calming this segment of Railway Terrace could have. Summerhill, Petersham, Lewisham, Stanmore, they're all on the same train line. They all have the same density and none of them are part of the express network in a way that would give them an unfair advantage. And yet, there's a discrepancy in how many people use these train stations. Summerhill has the most, with 113,000 monthly trips. And then Lewisham, despite being a potentially really useful connection to the L1, has just under 90,000 monthly trips. Comparing the amount of traffic around each station, it's really not hard to see why. I used to live opposite Lewisham train station and the traffic there was seriously awful. Some improvements have been made to the areas around the road since then, but the fact remains the problem is the traffic, and there just needs to be traffic calming. New Canterbury Road runs parallel to Railway Terrace and Trafalgar Street anyway, so there's already a more appropriate route in place. There just needs to be traffic calming measures there to direct cars onto that route instead of the one right next to the train station. Cars are the biggest preventative factor for cycling to begin with. 70% of people in Sydney say they would ride a bike, but they feel like it's too dangerous on the roads. And of course, cars are the reason for that. So traffic calming on local roads through landscaping, narrowing the roads, adding speed limits, adding modal filters, that's all just as important as adding bike lanes.
We got it all screaming, ain't no party like I in the West party, cause I in the West party, don't stop.
Okay, so what would make the Inner West cycling strategy better? First of all, tangible, measurable goals. Smart goals even. The council should aim for a specific cycling mode share within a specific time and have mechanisms there to keep themselves accountable. Here, once again, we can learn from the Netherlands. In Groningen, in 1977, a traffic circulation plan, after obviously a few years of good planning, was introduced in a matter of hours overnight. The plan essentially stopped cars from being able to conveniently access the city centre, and it was achieved by temporary barriers and signage. Over the subsequent years, after receiving positive feedback, these changes were made permanent. Today, the air quality is significantly better, all the shops make more money, and 2/3 of all trips into the city centre are made by bicycle. The Inner West Council could deploy similar tactical urbanism measures to install its bike network. This would be an especially viable option thanks to the success of many of the COVID pop-up bike lanes that have now been turned into permanent ones. One of the councillors already seems on board with this idea, and I'm sure others would be too. The Inner West really is in a spectacular position to become a world-class cycling hotspot. It's dense, it's really well connected to Sydney's train network, it's right next to City of Sydney's already pretty good bike network, and ultimately, it is the Greenway, that's this place right here where I've been filming this video, that gives me the most hope. See, this is what a bicycle superhighway looks like. And there are people who are planning to bring this peacefulness, this beauty, this safety and social connectedness to the rest of the Inner West too. Like some viewers who may have objected to my examples from Delft and Groningen might be thinking, we're not the Netherlands. We have nicer weather. We have the most varied bird song in the entire world. Our plants and animals are incredibly unique, and a lot of them rely on habitat that is in our cities. So with some time and a bit of hard work, we could build even better cycling cities than what the Netherlands has. And we've already started the process.